Hi there, my name's Chris Hansen. I live in Vermont in the United States, and as you can tell by my accent, I originally come from the other side of the world. I'm actually originally from New Zealand. I wanted to talk to you today about intentional peer support. I came to intentional peer support through my own lived experience of getting locked up, diagnosed, being on the sharp end of the needle, and being force treated. And for me, it was a time of great loss. I lost my job, I lost my friends, I lost custody of one of my children. I ended up having to go to the food bank and getting church charity help to stay in the housing situation that I was in, and I was actually on benefits for a number of years. What I discovered when I was in the hospital was that the people who did most of my recovery were not the people who were paid to be there. They were my fellow inpatients, many of whom had been in institutions for most of their lives, because at that time our big institutions had just closed and there were a lot of people struggling to find a place in the community that really supported them well. And I took up smoking because the smoking room was where the really meaningful conversations happened, and that's where I found a sense of belonging and a place where I wasn't judged. So when I lost my job, which ironically was in mental health services as a manager in a community mental health service in the public sector in New Zealand, and a clinician as a social worker, I reincarnated myself as a bit of an activist from hell. It was a way to deal with the anger, and it felt like a way of putting energy into something that I really believed. And so I started to do activism and human rights work, and was doing quite a lot of advising in the local, regional and national mental health sector in New Zealand, and then I ended up doing some work at the United Nations with the Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And we were really saying very strongly that forced treatment is torture. Forced treatment it often causes more trauma and damage than any therapeutic benefit that it purports to provide, and that we need to be seriously looking at alternatives that work. So I started looking at what was available, what was around, and intentional peer support stuck out as a way of using relationships in a way that was designed to create connection and social change, and didn't necessarily buy into the biomedical pathologies that some of us got kind of stuck in. So what is this intentional peer support? Well, it's really about creating relationships that enable us to take a bigger look at how we've come to learn who we are and how we operate in our world. So it's bigger than just peer relationships. It's really an opportunity to use relationships to start to do something different. So rather than looking at the notion of there's a problem with you, it's your responsibility to change your life, we start to think about how can we be mutually accountable? How can this be not just about you, but about us? So our relationships start to be viewed as partnerships that invite and inspire both of us to learn and grow, rather than just me being here to help you because you are deficient in some way and you've got a problem. The other focus is really on what is possible and what we together might move into, and what we might co-create, rather than the focus on stopping or avoiding what we don't want, because so much focus is on what we don't want, on, you know, your sleep and your eating and your thoughts and your mood, and are you still suicidal, and anxiety. And many of us lose touch with who we really are and what we really want to be, because we're focusing so much on what we don't want and what's wrong. So intentional peer support, there are 3 principles and there are 4 tasks. The principles are shifting the focus from helping to learning, from the individual to the relationship, and from fear to hope. And the tasks, as I'm about to outline to you, are connection, worldview, mutuality, and moving towards. The first principle is shifting the focus from helping to learning. And it's interesting to think about what the notion of helping connotes for each of us. When I'm helping you, there's an inherent power of balance. There's a notion that I have something that you need, that you are deficient, and that I don't have to change. You are the one who has the problem. And in intentional peer support, the aim is to endeavour to shift that focus to a relationship where both of us are in it together and both of us are co-learning, rather than me just focusing on what's wrong with you. The second principle is shifting the focus from the individual to the relationship. So rather than just being about you and you needing to change, and setting goals which are often very predetermined and may actually be my idea of what you need rather than your idea of what you'll need, and they're kind of concrete. If you don't reach those goals because maybe you found something different, or you found something that you find really hopeful, possible and exciting, if you're focused on meeting a goal, then you failed. We shift the focus to the relationship where both of us contribute to mutual learning, and we struggle together to learn how to communicate with openness and honesty, so that our relationship can become the model of other relationships. The third principle is shifting the focus from fear to hope. Fear-based relationships, as I've alluded to a little earlier, are based on what's wrong and what we're afraid is going to happen. And when you really think about it, much of what we know as traditional mental health services these days are about what we don't want to happen, what we're afraid of. And just think about times in your life when other people have been afraid of you, or have been afraid of what you were going to do. How did that affect the way you thought about yourself, and how did that affect your relationships? And for many of us, it becomes a very stuck place, and it becomes a place where I just feel that I'm being seen as something undesirable, something to be feared, something to be stopped or to be limited. As opposed to a hope or a possibility-based relationship, which is based on what is possible, where we're going, and how together we might be able to create something new. And sometimes it's just about a shift of energy. If I shift the focus from what I don't want you to do to focusing on what we're energized about and what is possible, the energy in the relationship and the focus and even the desire to be in the relationship completely changes. So there are 3 challenges inherent within all of this. The first challenge is the challenge of tolerating uncertainty. If I'm trying to stop you from doing something and we're setting goals, it's all very concrete. And what it does is it often sets you up to fail. And the challenge in this is the challenge of tolerating that we may not be able to predict what the outcome's going to be. We may start off in one direction and then decide to go in another. It's a little bit like the difference when you're going shopping between having your mother say, it's the beginning of the school year and we need to get you underwear and a school uniform and new stationery, and this is the shopping list. And going with a friend into a new town and walking along and finding out what there is, ambling through some of the stores, seeing some of the sights, and really just allowing the energy of the moment to take you where you want to go. The second one is sitting with discomfort, and I believe that a lot of moving forward, finding a life worth living, which is my preferred definition of recovery, is about sitting with discomfort. I have to learn to sit with my own discomfort, and much of the mental health services that we have at the moment are about wrapping us up in cotton wool and protecting us from all discomfort and treating us as fragile. And if I'm treated as fragile, I'll begin to believe I'm fragile and begin to act in that way. And I also need to find ways to sit with you in your discomfort, and you likewise with me and mine. And the third challenge is holding multiple truths. Your truth and my truth may be really different. You may have been brought up in a household where there was a lot of money, and the conversation at the dinner table was about stocks and shares, and my might have been brought up in a family where we believed that money was the root of all evil, and that people with money were probably unhappy, and therefore money wasn't something to hold on to. And in a relationship, this can be a source of tension, but finding ways to hold multiple truths may create learning possibilities for the both of us. So the tasks of intentional peer support: connection, worldview, mutuality, and moving towards. Connection. Connection is something that is really hard to describe. It's a feeling. I mean, just think about how you know that you're connected with somebody. You just know, and you really know when you're not connected. And yet it's something that is rather intangible. It can happen in a nanosecond. Walking down the street, you catch somebody's eye, or you strike up conversation with someone in the queue at the supermarket. Or it can be something that you spend all of your life working on. What connection creates is a sense of belonging. I'm not alone, we're in this together. And it builds a sense of trust, which can lead to learning for both of us. It also serves to move the focus away from the individual and into the shared space between us. As quickly as we connect, we can also disconnect. And the challenge in that is in finding ways to reconnect. Now, there are many, many ways that disconnection happens. Disconnection can happen because I sense judgment, because you lecture me, because you get distracted. It can happen because I'm moralizing, or I'm analysing you, or I make a joke that just doesn't hit the mark. There's a plethora of different sources of disconnect, and each one of us have our own little hot buttons that will create a disconnect. And what many of us forget about, haven't learnt, is that reconnection is always a possibility. It's not necessarily always desirable, but it is always a possibility. And I think most of us have learned to either label the other person as, a complete and utter fill in the blank, or just to say, there you go, I've done it again, I've screwed up, I just always do this. So we either blame ourselves or the other person. And most of us, a good proportion of us, don't consider that reconnection is an option, and that there may be some ways to talk about what happens that create an even deeper relationship. So a good reconnection, there's no formula for it, but sometimes a heartfelt apology, if I can own my part of what happened, maybe checking it out. It looks like something upset you. What's going on? Just being honest, saying, gosh, I was hurt by that, or to be honest, that really made me angry. I wonder if we can talk about it. Finding ways to reconnect, to bring out the elephant in the room, can often create a deeper relationship. So worldview is the second task, and worldview is really the way that I have learned to see the world. I know that most of you will know this back to front, but it's affected by all of those things that have created me, the person that I am right now, my history, my family of origin, culture, my religion, my birth order, experiences of trauma, experiences of privilege, experiences of travel, my siblings or caregivers or neighbourhood growing up, school experiences, education, work, life experience, housing experience. The list is limitless. And what it does is it creates the lens through which I see the world. It's how I come to know what I know. And those pieces of us are often the pieces that create the disconnects. I come to believe that money is the root of all evil, and you believe that a successful person is one who has a really good share package and portfolio. And we've got some really different worldviews that we may need to share about. We also talk about being trauma informed. And that worldview, that experience, what for many of us is labelled as mental illness, actually comes from what's happened. It's the result of life experience. And so rather than asking what's wrong, which sees me as being somehow defective, you can ask what happened, what's going on, how did you come to be here? The third task is mutuality. And mutuality is probably one of the hardest pieces for people who have been trained in traditional human services to grasp, because mutuality is about you and me in the conversation. So it's about both of us learning and growing together. Sometimes it's about me being prepared to share pieces of my story, where I've come from. Sometimes it's about me being prepared to ask for what I want in the relationship, or to own my own feelings and my own discomfort. It's only working if it's working for both of us. And that's really novel. It's really difficult for a lot of people to grasp. And mutuality actually often only happens in little moments. There's just this little bright moment in our conversation where all of a sudden we start to share openly and honestly, and there's this deep instant or moment of connection. And that's mutuality. All of a sudden I know that I'm not alone, and it's really where your worldview and my worldview sit together in the conversation, and it's not just one way. There's an energy that flows between us, and you know those moments when they happen. So mutuality is shifting the focus from being about you or about me to sharing responsibility and focusing on the relationship. And this is where we can say, you know, it really scares me, you know, when you keep talking about hurting yourself. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's happening. Can we talk about this in a way where we can both stay in the conversation? Some of you will be in situations where it's mandatory for you to report when somebody says they're going to hurt themselves. And so you can say, you know, I have to be honest, when you talk about wanting to hurt yourself, I have a mandatory responsibility to report that. Is there a way we can talk about what's going on for you where both of us can stay in the conversation? Or you can even say, so when you tell me that, what is it that you want from me? What is it that you'd like me to do? And most of the time, the response will be something like, I just want you to listen. I just want you to hear me. It's not that I want you to lock me up. It's that I want to be seen and I want to be heard. The fourth task, moving towards, is this kind of alchemy that happens when connection, worldview, and mutuality all come together. Your worldview and my worldview are both there, and there's this kind of energy that makes hope and possibility the underlying spirit of the conversation. And it creates opportunities. So it's that difference between the shopping trip with our mother to get the school uniforms and the journey through town, through a new town with our friend. It's the difference between having a mishap in the journey and saying, okay, what can we do? How can we weather this out? Maybe we have to stay over the night. Maybe we have to get the car fixed, or find some other way forward, rather than saying, well, we failed, we'll have to go home. It's finding the possibilities and finding the opportunities. And I can say that crises in my life, as uncomfortable as they've been, and with the amount of loss that's happened, even so, have been some of the best opportunities in my life. And think back on your own crises. Think back on what you learned from them, what you do differently now, what became possible. If your house was burnt down, sometimes it provided the opportunity to move. Sometimes it provided the opportunity to build the house that you really liked or that you really wanted. Sometimes it caused a really hard time in your life, but you ended up on a completely different pathway. And it's not necessarily indicative of something that is all bad. Sometimes the bushfire has to go through for the seeds to be able to germinate. So peer support is about putting energy into mutual learning relationships as opposed to just service relationships. It's finding ways to connect and reconnect with our world, our culture, our communities. And in so doing, we help each other to take a look at how we've come to make sense of the world. It's about redefining mental health and figuring out how to make this work for both of us. It's about supporting and challenging each other to move towards the life we want. And when we're talking about changing the world, I guess the hope is that if your relationship and my relationship start to have a life and an energy, that they start to affect the relationships that we have with our family, with the community, and it does start to be about social change and about changing the world. So just a little bit about the Parachute Project in New York City. The Parachute Project uses what's called needs-adapted treatment modalities, and this is from the same roots as the Open Dialogue projects. In New York City, it incorporates mobile crisis teams with psychiatrists, therapists, family therapists, social workers, and there are peer workers. There are peer-staffed respites, and there's also a peer-run and staffed support line. And this operates in 4 out of the 5 boroughs in New York City. So in this context, intentional peer support, we provide a 1 5-day core training, a co-supervision or co-reflection training 1 to 2 months later. There's a crisis training, an advanced training, and we provide co-reflection with all the peer staff and some of the mobile team members, some of the clinicians every month. Co-reflection is really like supervision, like clinical supervision. We do it with one another in a way that reflects the spirit and the practice of intentional peer support. Intentional peer support and Parachute project, everybody working in the project, including the project director, the manager, and all the clinicians, gets intentional peer support training. It's really about being conscious about our relationships. So many people working in mainstream mental health roles find it a useful practice. And in actual fact, many traditional systems, many hospitals and mainstream systems around the United States and around the world are starting to take an interest in implementing intentional peer support right across, that everybody gets the training or gets some training, and because it's seen as a practice that applies regardless of what relationships you're in, whether they're clinical, whether they're family, or whether they're peer. But it also helps to provide a framework for people who are working in specifically peer roles. And yes, it's also important that all members of the team, of the staff, do understand the uniqueness of the peer role of peer support, and that they support that in ways that are effective. So I've included here the contact details. We have a website, we have some Facebook pages, and I've also included the Parachute Project for anybody who's interested. The artwork was done by a colleague of ours called Beth Filson, and there's a really wonderful story about her and how she came to do this artwork on her website, which is also quoted here. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm always very happy to answer questions, to respond to emails. You can contact me via the website, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person or via webcast to answer your questions, because I'm sure there are many, but thank you for inviting me, and I wish you all the best in your journey. Cheers.